Since 2020, Ottawa has introduced 8 major censorship bills that hand the state unprecedented power over what Canadians may say, read, and watch online. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, known as JCCF, has put out a report that outlines these bills and the dangers they pose to freedom of speech and freedom of expression in Canada. I sat down with the founder and president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, John Carpay, to discuss these bills. John joins me now. Well, John, thank you so much for taking the time to discuss this with me today. Did you want to do a brief introduction of yourself, who you are, and your organization?
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me on your show. I'm glad to be with you and your listeners. My name is John Carpay, and I run the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. We are a national Canadian charity. We rely entirely on voluntary donations to carry out our work of defending freedom in Canada. We have a team of lawyers from coast to coast who are defending Canadians in court in respect of our freedom of expression, association, conscience, religion, peaceful assembly, travel and mobility, bodily autonomy, the right not to get injected without fully informed and fully voluntary consent. And we're about 15 years old. And so we've got, we defend freedom in the courts of law and in the court of public opinion.
So your organization just recently put out a report that sounds the alarm about the rise of internet censorship in Canada. Do you want to briefly go over that report?
Yeah, it's called The Death of 1,000 Clicks, kind of a play on words instead of Death of 1,000 Cuts. And the federal government has been incrementally, for the past 3 years, has been slowly taking over control of the internet. There are 2 bills that already passed in 2023, and they are the Online Streaming Act, which was known as Bill C-11, and the Online News Act, known as C-18. The Online Streaming Act gave authority to the CRTC, the Canadian Radio Telecommunications Commission, to designate what you and I are doing right now is broadcasting since Bill C-11, since the Online Streaming Act has been in force. So it used to be that the CRTC was regulating the television channels and radio, and that was it. Well, this legislation from 2 years ago has designated Canadian podcasts and YouTube is also now under the jurisdiction of the CRTC. They haven't yet done anything terrible, to my knowledge, in the last 2 years, but the authority is in place where they can regulate content of what Canadians are producing. They can play with algorithms for discoverability. So if there are things that they like, people will discover them more quickly and easily. Things that people don't like will be harder to, things that the CRTC doesn't like will be harder to find. So that's the first law. The second one was the Online News Act, also came into force in 2023, and that imposes this streaming tax, which has ultimately backfired on the government, and we have Meta has kicked the distribution of news off of Facebook. So people used to share links to news items with each other. Now that's not happening anymore, and that's more government control. And then we have 3 bills before the Parliament right now. And then lastly, we have the former Online Harms Act, which they are threatening to bring back. And that would be probably the worst of the 6, but it's currently not before Parliament.
When they table these bills in Ottawa, they're presenting them as something to keep Canadians safe, to keep children safe. It sounds really nice and pretty, and it gives you the good feelings when you hear them describe these bills. But in reality, it's much more dangerous than that, isn't it? It really impacts the freedoms that Canadians think they have: freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of the press. You mentioned the bill that references the news links being blocked on Meta. Now, I know the result of that has been journalists and news organizations taking a hit in viewership, because now you can no longer access news links on those platforms thanks to this act. And that really suppresses freedom of the press in Canada, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does. You mentioned the pretext, right? It sounds nice. And throughout human history, the tyrants never take away our rights and freedoms without offering a nice sounding pretext. So they're going to violate your privacy and have government read your emails and have government access your computers in order to stop the terrorists. We don't want to, there's all these scary terrorists out there. So we need surveillance to keep you safe. The government wants to censor the internet in the name of stopping misinformation and disinformation as determined by them.
Of course.
I don't think they're interested in stopping the government disinformation that they subject the population to more often than they should. So throughout history, I mean, in Russia in 1917, the communists said, we have to take away your rights and freedoms for the noble cause of stopping capitalist exploitation. 10 years later, you've got Adolf Hitler and the National Socialists in Germany saying, we have to take away your rights and freedoms in order to keep you safe from the communists, because the communists have done terrible things. So we're going to keep you safe from communism. So we have to take away your freedoms of association and expression, your right to form your own political parties. We have to keep you safe from a virus. So we have to destroy your freedom of association. It's illegal to have Christmas dinner with your mother or with your kids. We have to do that to protect you from a virus. So they're always pretending to, claiming to want to keep us safe from hate, misinformation, disinformation, protect national security, protect us from the terrorists, protect us from the weather, protect us from climate. There's always a pretext.
I have noticed that a lot of Canadians, when they look at these bills, they don't really want to hear the alarm bells that people like yourself, like myself, are putting out there online. They think that these bills are really good. Is there anything that you could say to these people to make them realize that censorship is never on the right side of history, that censorship is dangerous, and that eventually censorship will not only come for people like myself, like yourself, who are championing freedoms, it'll eventually come for them?
Yeah, people are often very short-sighted. Unless they feel an immediate impact, they tend not to care. So we've had this terrible law, the Online Streaming Act, has been on the books for 2 years, giving the CRTC control over podcasts and YouTube videos and anything online. They just haven't exercised it yet, right? But then people say, well, I don't really feel the impact. In the United Kingdom today, they are arresting thousands of people over their social media commentary. Every day there's over 30 people get arrested because they sent out a tweet about immigration or too much immigration or the wrong kind of immigration, and the police come knocking on the doors. How do they get there? Well, slowly, step by step by step. Often, freedom is not lost in one fell swoop. It's the death of 1,000 cuts. To answer your question, I mean, it's frustrating. People want to tend to focus on their immediate needs, and that's often is very understandable. We have growing poverty in Canada. We have more people using food banks. You have to forgive people for needing to look after their basic needs for food and shelter. The other bad bills through Parliament are Bill C2, which would give government officials warrantless access to our computers and cell phones without a search warrant. We have Bill C9 called the Combating Hate Act, which is going to result in so many more Canadians being prosecuted for hate speech. And then we have C8, the Critical Cyber Systems Protection Act, which actually allows federal cabinet ministers to kick individual Canadians off the internet. And they can tell internet providers, you are not to provide internet services to John Carpay or to Peter Smith or whoever.
That sounds really sinister.
It's very sinister. To kick you off the internet, makes it hard for you to communicate with others. You're cut off from the world. And if you use your phone for banking or simply just for texting and phoning, that's internet-based. If that gets cut off, you're pretty isolated.
It sounds like our government has been really busy growing very bloated and tabling, I think, 8 of these bills, the report says, that collectively do so much harm that Canadians just don't realize. I want to quickly read out a few points that these bills will achieve, some of them that have passed already and some of them that are currently before Parliament. So enable the CRTC to regulate Canadians' internet consumption, content creation, and communications. That in itself sounds really scary. And that's just one of 6. Establish a streaming tax on non non-Canadian content, curtail ordinary Canadians' access to news. This doesn't sound like freedom at all. This sounds dystopian. Compromise privacy by increasing the power of government to engage in warrantless surveillance. This to me sounds like China. It doesn't sound like Canada anymore. How did we get here?
Step by step by step. Canadians are like the frog that is slowly being boiled to death, but they never quite realize that the water is getting hotter and hotter. The solution is to just keep on speaking truth and to encourage people to be engaged in the democratic process. Some good news. We had one of the three terrible bills currently before Parliament is Bill C2, the Strong Borders Act. In my view, should be called the Strong Surveillance Act. And the government got so much pushback on Bill C2 from Canadians all over the country contacting their MPs of all parties that the government has actually put it on the back burner. Now, the threat is not gone completely. It's still there. But Bill C2 got so much pushback from so many Canadians that the government backed down. So right now, the bill that is in greatest danger of passing is Bill C9, which is the Combating Hate Act, which would result in us becoming more like the United Kingdom with their 30+ daily arrests.
That part is really frightening because I have followed some of those cases in the UK where I think I watched a judge hand down something like 30-month sentence for a Facebook post that was made. I believe it was related to criticizing immigration in the UK. And the demeanor of the judge was just chilling, because he said something like, "This offense is so serious." And the person was just making a Facebook post expressing concerns about mass immigration. People can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is the case. Thinking about my own X feed, I criticize immigration a lot because I see the dangers of it. And I see what's unfolding in the UK, in Australia, and what that means, especially recently with the Bondi Beach incident. I am very outspoken about it. In the back of my mind, I'm always thinking to myself, is there going to come a moment where someone from the government is going to knock on my door and say, "Excuse me, you have been doing a little bit too much thinking and a little bit too much expressing yourself online"? Is that a reality for us if Bill C9 passes?
It's a step towards becoming like the United Kingdom. We've had hate speech laws in Canada on the books for decades. However, the current law requires that the Attorney General approve of any hate speech prosecution. So this is not just in the hands of the local police and prosecutors, but it needs to be approved by the Justice Minister, the Attorney General. So Bill C9 would scrap that requirement so that local police...
Attorney General requirement?
Would scrap the requirement that no hate speech prosecution can be commenced against a Canadian until it's been formally approved by the Justice Minister, or the also known as the Attorney General. That's a current requirement. So it puts a restraint on how often it's used, because the local police cannot simply respond to local complaints and get a phone call and, "Well, I think what Mark Smith said is hateful," and then the police go over there and charge him based on a complaint. It doesn't work that way. If they want to prosecute Mark Smith for hate speech, they need the approval of the Justice Minister. So it's a review process. And so that has been in place since the hate speech laws first came into force several decades ago. So what Bill C9 does is it gets rid of that review process and then puts it in the discretion of the local police. If they feel something is hateful, they can press charges and the local prosecutors can run it. So the result is you're going to see way more hate speech prosecutions than ever before.
That will give the police powers to prosecute for hate speech. Is it going to be up to them to decide what hateful speech is in the moment? So isn't it going to depend on the ideological alignment of the police officer of what hate speech is and what they will pursue?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've seen a double standard in prosecutions already, right? Where you take, for example, Chris Barber and Tamara Leach were found guilty of mischief, including participation in blocking off a city street or indirect participation. But that same law is not applied against Muslims who block Toronto streets for a prayer meeting. They don't get criminally charged. You know, we saw in Winnipeg, Manitoba, at the legislature, there were some Aboriginals protesting against residential schools. I believe passionately in the right to protest peacefully, to say what you want to say. They tore down a big bronze statue of Queen Victoria in broad daylight with police watching. And that's a crime. To willfully destroy public property is a criminal code offense. Everybody knows that. And police just stood by and watched, and the Crown said, no, they're not prosecuting. Why? Well, because these are Aboriginals, so they've got the right ethnicity, and they're protesting against residential schools, so it's the right cause. Right ethnicity, right cause, and then you can get away with committing a crime in Canada. What's going to happen with the hate speech when the police have broad discretion, and it is subjective? You and I could listen to the same podcast. You could say it's hateful. I listen to the same podcast. I say, no, it's just political opinion. You and I could watch the same YouTube video, and I could say it's hateful, and you say, no, it's just an opinion. So it is very subjective.
I mean, I think at this point, to those of us who are paying careful attention with all of this stuff, these bills, hate speech laws, etc., we can pretty much conclude that hate speech is just something that the government hates.
Yeah.
And it's vaguely defined, and it's very easily weaponized against political opponents. It's a very chilling thought to ponder on what Canada could look like if we don't stop these bills. Now, do you have any good news for us in terms of, can we stop these bills? What do we need to do to stop these bills? How afraid should people be for speaking out online now? Because I know I myself kind of do it regularly on X, on my social media platforms, because I want to fight for the freedoms in this country. I fled a communist regime where no one had freedom of speech. I want to be able to say, I've done everything I could, and I've said everything I could, despite the possible consequences. Do we have any ray of hope coming down the pipeline in the face of these censorship laws and bills?
Well, there's an old maxim from Edmund Burke that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And so the worst thing that we can do is to be disengaged from the democratic process. We see when citizens get involved, federally, provincially, municipally, school board level, it's the people who are active in politics who basically decide what's going on. They have far more influence for good or for evil than people who are not involved. There's an old French proverb that says, if you don't do politics, then politics will be done unto you. Way back over 2,000 years ago in Plato's Republic, it was said that those who refuse to engage in the democratic process will suffer the fate of being governed by their inferiors. I see some shifts in Canada. There are people who, before lockdowns in 2020, they are not involved at all. They barely voted, and they did nothing. And now these very same people are involved in the school board elections, municipal, provincial, federal. What we need to do as Canadians is roll up our sleeves, take out a membership in a political party, federally, provincially, both. Screen candidates. If there's a school board election, phone the candidates, ask them if they think it's okay to push transgender ideology on children. This is what we have to do. And it does work. We saw it with Bill C-2, where the government has backed down and retreated on this Strong Borders Act because there is so much opposition.
You heard it right here, ladies and gentlemen. It works if you contact your elected representatives and you give pushback. So let this be an encouragement for you to get involved and to get active and to push back on these censorship laws that the government is trying to foist upon us. John, where can people find your work? What can people do to support your organization? Let us know.
So the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, JCCF, Justice Center Constitutional Freedoms, jccf.ca. And people are, well, if you want to support us financially, you can donate by December 31st, and you'll get an official tax receipt in February 2026. You're also welcome to sign up for a free newsletter, which I'm pleased to say we only send it out once or twice a month. That's it. It's not a daily email, but if you go to our website, you can sign up for our email newsletter to keep informed about our cases.
John Carpay, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me to discuss these things. I hope to chat with you again soon about it.
Well, likewise. Thanks for having me on your show.
Well, thank you so much for watching this video, friends. If you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing to the channel, smashing the like button on this video, and leaving me a comment. If you don't already, follow me on X, My handle is @catcanada_TM. And if you want to further support the channel, I'm going to leave my support link in the description below and in the pinned comment below of this video as well. Until next time.